Alright, so in this video we're going to look at subtracting integers. Now subtracting integers again should be something that was covered in grade 7, so I do hope this is coming as a review to you. So I will not cover it maybe in as much depth as I would if I was introducing it for the very first time. So for something like -4 minus -3, so if I was to start out using my models, just so we have an idea of what's going on, I would start out with my 4 negatives, okay, and then I'm going to subtract 3 of those negatives. That's what it's telling me to do. I got 4 of them, and I'm going to start by now taking 3 of them away. So I'm going to take these 3 negative integers away so that they are gone. And what I'm left with now is just that single negative integer left over. So I've got -1 by itself as my answer. Okay. Now if we look at the second one, -4 minus +3, so same thing, I start out with 4 negatives, okay? And what I need to now take away is 3 positives, but if you look at what I have drawn, I certainly don't have any positives that I can take away, okay? So the key here is I need to be able to start at -4, but I also need some positives to be able to take away. I need to be able to take away 3 positives. Well, the only way I could take 3 positives away is if I have 3 0 pairs attached to my -4. So right now, this negative and positive, and this negative and positive, and this negative positive, these guys all group together to make a big 0 pair. So they really don't count, okay? I still just have -4, so I'm still starting with a value of -4. But now that I've added in those 0 pairs, I have 3 positives that I can take away and remove from my expression. And when I do that, I'm left now with those 7 negative integer chips all together. Okay? So, when I am subtracting my integers, if I don't have enough of something to take away, then what I need to make sure I do is I add in some 0 pairs so that I can have enough of a specific type of integer to take away. Okay? Now I want you to notice, so this one here, I've kind of changed the question a little bit. This first one here, this is what we just had, right? We have -4, and we're subtracting -3 from that -4. Alright, now I have another one here where we've got -4, and we're going to add +3 into that. So this is a little bit different. So I'm going to add in 3 positives, like this. And when I add in those 3 positives, what happens is they group together with those 3 negatives to create a 0 pair. And really, what kind of ends up happening is it's kind of like I took these 3 negatives and I took them away because they got removed from my expression. They no longer count towards my expression, and I still get a value of -1. So these two statements are equal to one another. They are the exact same thing, these two statements. Okay? And that's kind of the idea that we work with when we're subtracting integers, is that I can, instead of saying subtract -3, I can think of it as adding +3. It would do the same thing, right? So if I take away negatives, my answer should actually become more positive, right? So it's like adding in positives. So really, that's our rule that you would have learned for subtraction. So instead of subtracting, what you end up doing is adding the opposite integer. So if the expression was -3 minus -5, what we do is, instead of subtracting, we add, in blue, the opposite integer in green. Okay? So notice that instead of subtracting, it goes to an addition, and instead of -5, we move that to a +5. Okay? So the number portion stays the same, but the sign flips to its opposite. Okay? So that's what you would have done back in grade 7 for subtraction. So if I was to start doing these now and go a little bit faster, so if I've got +3, and instead of subtracting -7, I'm going to rewrite that as adding, and then I still have 7, but instead of it being negative 7, it would now switch to positive 7. Well, now, positive 3 plus positive 7, same sign, so I just get a bigger grouping of positives, and we have positive 10. For the next one, I'm not going to do it with the colors because it takes too long. So I've got negative 12, and instead of subtracting, I'm going to rewrite it as addition. And instead of positive 5, I'm going to rewrite that as its opposite, negative 5. Same question, okay? And now this is negative 12 plus negative 5, same sign, so I just get a bigger grouping of negatives, 12 plus 5, giving me 17. Then I have positive 4, and instead of subtracting positive 10, I'm going to add the opposite, and I'm going to add negative 10. Okay, so I'm adding. These two guys have different signs, so I'm going to find the difference. So if you watched the last video, when we're finding the difference, which quantity is bigger? Well, in this case, there are more negatives than there are positives. I have 10 negatives and 4 positives. There are more negatives, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And now I find the difference between them. 10 minus 4, there is a difference of 6. Right? So 4 of my positives will cancel out 4 of the negatives, but there will still be 6 negatives left over. Then we've got negative 2, and instead of subtracting negative 8, I'm going to rewrite that as adding the opposite of negative 8, which is positive 8. I still have different signs for my addition. Okay, I've got a negative and a positive being added together. There are more positives in this case than there are negatives. That means there will be positives left over. The difference between 8 and 2, 8 minus 2, gives me 6. So in this one I have positive 6. Okay? Now, I want to point out sometimes it does not make sense to rewrite as adding the opposite. This one, positive 9 minus positive 6. This is actually what you've been doing for many, many years already. You can simply think of that as 9 minus 6. Okay? If it is logical to just leave it as a subtraction, by all means, it makes sense. Go ahead. Okay? But when you can tell that it's not a logical statement the way you're looking at it, rewrite it as addition. If you can do it without rewriting, that's okay, but for most people, rewriting as adding the opposite is going to be beneficial. Okay, so if I had something like positive 12 minus positive 5, that's really the same thing as 12 minus 5. Do I need to rewrite that? No. I can write it as just 7. Okay, but if I have something like positive 3 minus positive 20, that one is not maybe logical. So I would probably rewrite that one as positive 3 plus negative 20, and then compare what's left over after my integers kind of have their little battle. All right? All right. Now, it is possible to have more than one subtraction, right? We can do lots in a row. What I'm going to do is every time I rewrite a subtraction to an addition, his neighbor flips to its opposite. So when I change this subtraction sign, that integer flips to its opposite. So as I rewrite, it would be negative 7, and then I'll rewrite as plus. And instead of positive 6, we would write that as negative 6. Okay? Now, I haven't done anything yet with my second one. Okay? I can do them all at once, but this is just to demonstrate that I need to do each one separately. Okay, so I've got this here, and instead of subtracting negative 5, I'm going to rewrite that as adding, and I'm going to do the opposite of negative 5, which is positive 5. Okay, now I'm going to look at adding all my integers together here. So I have negative 6 plus negative 7 plus negative 6, and that's going to give me negative 13. I just get a larger grouping of negative values. I have not done anything with the 5. So now I need to add my positive 5. Negative 13 and positive 5 added together, they are different signs. I need to figure out which quantity will be bigger. I know that there are more negatives than there are positives, so I will have negatives left over. The difference between them, so 13, which is my bigger quantity, minus 5, which is my smaller quantity, gives me 8. So my value is negative 8. Okay? So when subtracting integers, most of the time it makes sense to rewrite as adding the opposite integer. There are times where you might not need to, such as when it's a positive minus a positive. If that first number is bigger, that's the exact statement that you've already been working on for several years. So by all means, you can do that one as normal. But for the most part, instead of subtracting, we rewrite as addition. And when we do that, our neighbor also flips to its opposite sign. So this one went from positive 6 to a negative 6. And that's subtracting integers.